Hello, welcome to the Emotionally Focused Therapy Podcast with your hosts, EFT trainer Michael Barnett and EFT supervisor Michael Preston. Together, we will be exploring the art, heart, and science of EFT. We're excited to bring you this first season of the EFT podcast Foundations, where Michael and Michael will be breaking down the fundamental elements of EFT.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Emotionally Focused Therapy Podcast. As always, I'm Michael Preston and joined by Michael Barnett.
Hey, everybody.
How are you?
I'm good. Great to see you, Michael. As always.
As always. Lovely conversation ahead of us today. Looking forward to jumping into this. We're going to have to be intentional about speaking slowly, I think, because it's a meaty episode. I think I'd call it a meaty one.
We are in for a ride today. So to speak, I'll do my best to speak slowly and not voluminously, which I can get a lot of grief for.
We're quite well known for.
I am quite well known. Yes. Yeah. So I will do my best to stay in my lane here.
Good. You're good. I'll try to see if I'll keep the rails up for us.
All right.
We've gone through some of the particular pieces here, and now we're kind of looking at this kind of process therapy where we have these stages and we have steps and we have the tango, right? And we're talking about kind of a combination of the arc that we take people through, right? And so it is going to be a bit heavy. So we'll do our best to walk through this. So let's begin by how can we begin to clarify the EFT, like when we say it's a process model, right? There's a set of events we're looking to do. How can we start talking about this in a really clear way for the listeners to kind of understand what that process model means and looks like?
That is perhaps one of the most important questions to our vision and hope for what people get from this podcast, which is begins to really show how very significant aspects of the model from a very high level, from a 10,000-foot view, actually fit together. As I've been turning this over, and in no small part in being super excited about this conversation, I had the image of nesting dolls.
Yeah.
And how one aspect fits into the next. So what are we doing in the model? And when we talk about the EFT clinical process, there are all these interconnected parts. And if I could offer a bit of a backdrop, which is one of the things we will talk about is the tango. But the tango was something that, even though we've been talking about it perhaps for 10 years now, it still feels relatively new only because a lot of us who've been around for a while never had the good fortune of being trained in the tango. So we were trained in the steps and stages. And one of the things that happen consistently, I can speak from my own experience, and I can speak for countless supervision experiences with supervisees, is we're trying to kind of force fit the steps into what the therapist is supposed to be doing. And so it's racking our brains. Okay, am I in step 1? Am I in step 2? What are the tasks? What should I be doing here? And there was something about that just never felt like a clear fit. And then the tango came into play, and it pulled a lot of different things together. So the frustrations and struggles that so many of us went through, I think, got remedied, if you will, by our way of looking at the model through the tango. So what I hope to do in our conversation, you and I have talked this kind of thing together, is bring alive for people the way that when we start looking at EFT and the clinical process, how we have the broad stroke piece of we have 3 stages, and within the stages we have 9 steps, and how do we use the steps? And then we have this thing called the tango that started to really come to life in around 2015. And so how do those fit together, and how can the EFT therapist understand the relevance of each one of them for doing really, really good EFT? And what I hope is from our conversation today in this dialogue that we bring that alive for people.
So let me pause this here. Hey, we are so excited to have Dr. Sylvia Irwin and Michael Barnett in the studio. You all know Michael Barnett, but you will also get to know Dr. Sylvia Irwin later on as she joins us in the studio this season. But they also want to share a little bit about their upcoming externship.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'd love to. If you have enjoyed this podcast so far, or enjoyed it half as much as we have in doing it, there's a place where you can actually learn how to begin to integrate this model in a very deep way in your own practices, in your own lives. And that is the 4-day externship in EFT. We're delighted to be able to offer this. We offer it annually, and it's a lovely combination of didactic material, lots of video demonstrations of actual sessions to demonstrate the concepts, and unscripted sessions with clients that we have never met before, showing the EFT process in motion. You're going to be able to learn not only the theory, the underpinnings of what we've been talking about, but actually the whole process model, and then how to apply it with your own clients in your own way. So I really hope you'll be able to join us. It's going to be a lot of fun and truly very powerful. It'll be a really wonderful set of resources to bring into your own practices.
We hope to welcome you to the LA EFT community. You can learn more about the externship and how to register at my website, www.drsylvinairwin.com. You can also learn about it at the EFT-CLA website at eftcla.org. So hope you join us.
I'll say this.
Yeah.
I want to name, just in case someone's kind of randomly found this podcast and they haven't listened to the ones before, and you should go back and listen to them. But we're naming the nesting dolls, and we've got the first thing we've talked about here, and kind of the way to understand some of this processes and stages, and kind of understanding that couples are moving, they're showing up in stage 1, we're working to get them to stage 2, and then we're finishing in stage 3. That's how numbers work usually. But I want to name what each stage is, even though we're not going to go through and name all the 9 steps. But I want to say, so where we meet couples is in stage 1. They're in high conflict, and we call that stage de-escalation, because that really is the target. That's where we're heading, right? Yeah. And then stage 2 is restructuring the bond, right? So really creating a secure attachment by addressing all of their internal working models that have been just broken, and we're putting the pieces back together with their partner. And then stage 3 is called consolidation. So those are the stages of what our work in EFT. And then you're saying inside those 3 stages, we have 9 steps that we're working on throughout the arc of therapy.
Right.
Okay. And then some of those, and so you can speak to this a little bit, some of those steps take place in stage 1, de-escalation. Some of them take place in stage 2, and then some of them take place in stage 3. Yes?
Bingo.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So we can see how they fit inside. Like, I like that vision of the nesting doll, because I think it does help. Like, if it helps me remember these things fit inside that thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And they all fit together. And
Yes.
I think that's the beauty of one of the ways that we can talk about this. So, if we kind of zoom all the way up to the stages, the stages provide kind of the overarching therapeutic goals of the EFT process model, having 3 discrete chapters. In other words, I think most couples therapies would feel complete. Other models would feel complete at the end of stage 1. We have essentially helped people's relationship improve by leaps and bounds. It's qualitatively different. And that's where most couples therapies will stop. That's it. Mission accomplished. Right. And of course, the way we do that is looking at the problem as this dynamic, an interpersonal dynamic that has been unintentionally co-created over time. And the dynamic becomes the problematic thing that creates disconnection. And so once people learn that, and they learn how that is emotionally organized and the intensity of it, and they get their partner's experience around that too, they find themselves getting out of conflict. We call it exiting the cycle relatively well. And once there's stability with that, then the next therapeutic goal would be, we call it restructuring the attachment bond. And if I oversimplify that, now we have gone from the relational, interpersonal piece to now the intrapsychic piece.
Yeah.
And so when we are restructuring the attachment bond, we're helping people show up around the pain and agony of their working models that tend to get created very early in life and be reinforced through life and are incredibly limiting. But to get from the experience of living in an insecurely attached internal world to being securely attached, people have to face their demons. And None of us want to face our demons to the point
No.
where we often disown them, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's
It's
all
much easier. It's much easier just to pretend they don't exist.
exactly. And so we help people collide with those. We elicit those, but the partner becomes the antidote, becomes the safe haven to be able to lean into and have a transformative experience. So partners now are transforming one another's internal worlds, right? And then ultimately, after going through this incredibly deep journey, then we consolidate that as both people have gone through that. So there's a different goal, there's a different purpose for each stage, and that directs what the therapist will be doing. What are we going to be doing with emotion? And it's different in each stage. And that's really important because oftentimes people have a hard time understanding where they are on the map. Are we in stage 1, stage 2? Don't often get confused about stage 3. But the reality is, once we've helped people achieve a stable de-escalation through a lot of hard work that goes on in stage 1, that becomes the prerequisite for doing the intrapsychic work. The stage is set. People are more emotionally equipped and now can tolerate really deep emotion. They can also lean into one another. And then we help people actually do that and take on the often felt sense that lives in people's bones that often can be very unconscious, bring that to the surface, help people engage with the pain of that, and then lean in and ask for their needs to be met. It's a profound process. And when
Huge.
it happens, huge leaps of faith over and over. And that becomes the transformative moment or moments that create a very different intrinsic sense of self through relationship. And then, of course, the third part is, can we consolidate the journey? So we have these stages that in a very general way define the therapeutic purpose that the EFT therapist is working toward. And that's the most overarching way of looking at the process model. Okay, so we're either working toward de-escalation or we're working toward restructuring the attachment bond. And at the end of when both people have done their key change events, we help consolidate the process, right? And so
That's the big exterior of our nesting doll.
that's right. That's right. And so then the question that seemed to just haunt me for a long time is trying to force fit like a square peg in a round hole the steps into therapist process.
Yeah.
I would like to just kind of give a shout out to my friend and colleague, Matt Angelsdorf, who's the trainer in Germany, for saying something that a light bulb went off inside of me. And he actually said, the way I use this, it's markers of client, process, and progress. What is it we're looking at in terms of what our clients are integrating and internalizing in the actual experience of the therapy? And we have like guideposts or markers, and each step is an indication of a marker, what should be happening. And so in stage 1, we have 4 steps that move toward de-escalation. In stage 2, we have 3 steps about how we go about the process of helping people restructure that attachment bond from a secure, insecure experience to become securely attached. And then in stage 3, we have 2 more steps that either indicate, are we going into an unresolved problem that a couple needs to speak to from a position of trust and security now, or are we going to simply just consolidate the process now and say goodbye?
Yeah.
And I'll go into the defining all the steps here just in service of brevity, but it's in all the EFT literature. But the way that is really helpful for the EFT therapist is it provides checkpoints.
Right.
Do people really see that it's actually the reactivity that they do and or their partner or partners do that is a problem that pulls them into a dynamic? Can they really see that or no? And if no, I have more work to do there. Can people really actually begin to organize the experience of their attachment fears in stage 2? Can they begin to distill them, name them, paint the picture of them? And then can they let themselves feel that? It's very scary, right? Or no, do we have more work to do there? Right? So these are ways in a general sense of using some of the steps as a checkpoint in terms of what is the client's progress in their process of therapy, right? And one of the things I would say about the steps to keep in mind is they're not sequential, which can be confusing early on, but they're like the 4 steps of the stage 1 process. They're not sequential, but they're part of like a composite of a whole that we're going through over and over. And then lastly, we have the Tango, which is how the therapist, it's like the clinical process that guides the EFT therapist through how they implement the therapy and create a really thorough and successful integration of these markers in the steps. How they could create a successful integration of what's defined in each step to complete a complete course of therapy.
Right. Right.
So
Well,
that,
let me pause this real fast because I
yeah,
want to slow us down. Right.
yeah. No, I
Before we
just
do.
paint a
Before
broad
we
picture
do.
to
Yeah.
start.
Because I just want to make sure I'm following you
Yeah.
and in the way that we're talking about the steps. And I liked how we're able to take the steps and be able to look at what we're seeing as like the fruits of therapy along the way, right? And making sure that clients are moving through that process. And we have these steps we can kind of look at and say, okay, these are the things that I need to be seeing to make sure we're moving through the process. And it's a way of being able to um, not say, okay, well, I have to go and do this today, but it's going,
Right.
okay, if I'm not seeing, like, for example, if it's not a co-constructed narrative yet, then they're not holding the cycle as a problem that they create together. And so we're still going to be working to help them do that.
Right.
But it's not like we're going to go in and say, okay, guys, today we're working on this is a co-constructed narrative. Do we understand what co-constructed means? Right? It's not a reason to stop and go do psycho ed about their thing, but it's something to hold, right? And that we're working on continually and paying attention to. I think one of the steps is about alliance building. And I don't know a model that exists that doesn't have alliance building as
Right.
part of its model. But it's not like we go in today to work on that goal. That's a thing that we do in every session throughout the arc of therapy. And I can look and say, oh, look at, do I have the alliance to do this work with them?
Right.
Like, have I established that? And how we do that is a different thing. We don't go in and again talk about alliance, but it's
Yep.
the way we show up that builds the alliance. And
That's right.
so it's hard to talk about the steps as like something you can do when it's not something you really do, but it is something that we're going, yeah, we want to make sure that these things are present or growing in therapeutic process that we can see happening along the way.
To what
Right?
degree are these things in place? And
Yeah, yeah.
so we get stuck, and maybe it's the alliance. Maybe I said
Right.
something that left the client feeling criticized, or I really
Yeah.
missed somebody. So, I won't say, so let's sit down and let's unpack the alliance right now.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I know I need to attend to that.
Yes.
And
I love
even though
that.
we may have done a lot of work in stage one already, even though step one refers to alliance building, we're going to attend to that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can remember just a good example there. I can remember a client coming in one time, and this can happen probably because I'm a pursuer, but it was a withdrawal that came in, and it was really withdrawn. And I was kind of leaned in. I said, "Hey, what's happening right now?" And he said, I left our last session feeling like I'm just the problem here. Like it's really all just me. I was like, woo. But the alarm bell went off for me of, I've got alliance work to do today. I've got work to do right here.
That's
Right.
right. That's
And
it.
so just paying attention to that and knowing that that's such an important part of our process and that box has to stay checked or we have to go make sure we can recheck it.
I love your example there because in that moment, you're referring back to here's something that feels like it needs some more support to be thoroughly in place,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
that's something I want to refer to internally, and that guides the work that I'm going to do. Or, for example, let's say we've been really immersed in some good stage one work, and as is more typical than not, one partner seems to drop into their emotional experience much more readily than their other partner.
Mhm.
And doing so, they can organize it. They can speak to the narrative that gets set in motion when their partner does their action tendency, becomes the cue, of course. And they can also feel the feelings that that narrative brings up. But we notice the other partner isn't quite there yet, right? The other partner gets reactive,
Mhm.
say a little bit about it, but we haven't helped them fully elicit the full narrative. It doesn't have the kind of detail and texture. So that would point me in the direction of the work I need to do is with that partner right now,
Mhm.
see if I can help them equally develop what is that narrative? What is the meaning when my partner does their step in the dance and it affects me? What is it about that that affects me? And I
Yeah.
want to bring that alive, right? So I have these checkpoints and I'm trying to make sure that these aspects of the therapy have been fulfilled and the clients have really engaged and embraced and internalized that. Right? It guides my work. I kind of know where I want to go because the steps are providing very nice guideposts in a
Yeah.
way.
Even this conversation, this is helping me. Even I love this phrasing around to what extent has this been integrated? 'Cause you do have times where one person in the relationship or in the partnership has kind of figured out, like, yeah, I see my move and I really get it. And the other partner hasn't gotten there yet.
That's
And so,
right.
like, Well, it's kind of like, well, yep, we kind of starting to shade that one in, but it's not really in full color yet. And so we're still working, and it informs, this is where I want to spend time in this work because I've got to bring that more alive. And I think that's such a helpful way to understand about the steps, not as what are we doing, right? But the information that we need, the feedback we're getting from the couple that helps guide what we're aiming to work on. And I think that's such a helpful way to see it.
It's such a helpful tool for the EFT therapist, right? We
Yeah.
can evaluate, like, what do we need to be attending to?
I
What
love it.
feels like it requires some more attention here and some more support. And yeah, I do too. I think it's an enormously helpful resource.
Yeah, like I said, even this conversation right now, I'm going, "Oh, I might have to go back and look at those steps again."
Yeah.
Think about that.
Oh, good.
So
Good, good.
that's great. I really hope so. What we'll do for that, right,
Mhm.
is we'll put a link to a PDF that kind of walks people through some of those
Yeah.
steps. And what we're hoping you can do is read through those steps with the lens that this is not about what you're going to do in therapy, but more of a checklist and a way to see the arc, where you are in the arc of therapy, and whether or not these things are being integrated and to what level these things are being integrated by the couple. Cool?
Exactly.
Great. So then take us into the tango. That's where we're going next. Kind of this is the next nestling doll. We call this the map, right? This is our map. And what is this map
So
called the
let's
tango?
this finally, right? It was like
We're getting there. We're getting so close,
I
everybody.
know. So this is a map because it is the guide or the map for what the therapist will actually do to bring about the aspects of the steps that still need integration and development.
Mhm.
Therapist's process. This is what we do clinically. So as the steps are more of an indication of where the clients are in terms of integrating the process. So we bring for stage one, this like a priori knowledge that we see the problem as systemic. We see it as a dynamic that's co-created, and we base it on what we understand about attachment and attachment theory. So people have an emotional process that culminates in the most vivid, tangible part of the emotional experience, which is a behavior. But the behavior is the tip of the iceberg. So when we're working in stage one, what we're paying attention to is, are people beginning to understand the start point of their reaction, their step, their contribution to the conflict? And the way we help people move into that is understanding their emotional experience. There's a moment that it starts, which is their partner's action tendency. Because their partner is a significant other and resides in the inner sanctum of their hearts and has so much importance in so many deep, deep ways, that those moments are intensely impactful, and we help people begin to speak to those. People often aren't as aware of them. So we used to often say, we're bringing what's on the periphery of people's awareness into clear consciousness, right? Clear awareness. And as people start to kind of bring that story alive, it's a very painful and sad story. It's a
Right.
painful, vulnerable story, and people start to feel the vulnerability, and they start to show that, and it's very different than what they show in the moments of reactivity, right? So we're kind of gauging what we're doing in stage one with the tangos, how we are bringing that emotional experience alive. To what degree is each partner really, really internalizing that? And then can they ultimately lean into their partner and share from a vulnerable place and make sense of that? Then can their partner be responsive? So we're looking at the tango as ways of bringing all of that about. And as we're looking at where our clients are in the process, if we're just looking at stage one, for example, we're seeing what still needs development and integration. And we have a way of bringing that about that is very reliable, which we call the tango, which is 5 moves. And it's kind of hard to talk about the moves, at least I have a hard time talking about the moves general way, stage to stage, because I think what's taking place in several of the moves of the tango are very distinctly different, even though the process is the same. So in other words, in move one, people say we're reflecting a present process, but that can mean a lot. That's very general.
Right.
So in stage one, the present process is as it pertains to a systemic problem being really integrated for the couple, having a new way of dealing with that systemic problem. In stage two, that would mean, how are we going to set the stage for ultimately eliciting people's working models? And while they're in the throes of the agony of those working models and it's really alive, can they lean in ultimately to the partner and ask for their needs to be met, for a sense of comfort or reassurance, which is usually an enormous sea change in people's life experience. So we're starting at different places with an a priori frame based on ultimately the stages. So the tango allows the therapist a process of catching where the couple is, understanding where they are in their own process, and then beginning to facilitate a therapeutic experience to more thoroughly bring about the, again, integration of each step that's pertinent to each stage.
So I'll say what you're helping kind of name is that I like the idea that you were talking about the intolerable story that's on the inside. And in stage one, that is just the intolerableness of a moment that can happen between the couple where they feel misunderstood. Like it's a pretty
Right.
even that can set off this intolerable feeling, which then they have the behavior, right? Which is what we often talk about as either pursuing or withdrawing. And it
Yeah,
comes out in many different ways, and that gets really nuanced itself and all that stuff. But what we're doing there is helping them engage the intolerableness of it without jumping into the behavior that they would normally do to manage that feeling.
that's exactly right.
And that's what we're doing in the tango. But as part of that, we're also eliciting their partner so that they can begin to see that this intolerable thing that's coming for them can be tolerated with the help of their partner,
Exactly.
right?
No, exactly. So the intolerable piece in stage one would be the unspoken meaning or story. So couple conflict often looks like trigger reaction, trigger reaction, trigger reaction.
Right. Yeah.
We know those waters actually run much deeper. So we endeavor to help people bring the story forward, the story that isn't told. That's often very painful and very vulnerable. And rather than having an indirect expression of the painful emotions that reside there and the vulnerable emotions that reside there, which would usually be a version of shutting down or ramping up and escalating, we
Yep.
help people lean in very directly,
Yeah.
right? And share that story. So the tango will help us by understanding where significant others are, opening up a session to kind of evaluate that and ask them kind of where they are in that process. And then, based on where they are in the therapy process, we want to start engaging a certain kind of process based on attachment emotion and want to help people begin to distill even further, get more granular, more detailed, more expressive and expansive of the story that is plaguing them. In stage one, it's the story of being on the receiving end of your partner's
Right.
reactivity. In stage two, it's a story of what gets so terrifying to reach to your partner in that moment. And it starts to open up the experience of something very disowned. That's the story of our working models.
Yeah. It's a story they've been carrying with them their whole life. These are very old processes that were already there before the relationship began.
That's right.
And the tango is what we're using to go and organize and bring forward
That's right.
and elicit their partner's response
That's right.
over and over across all sessions.
That's
We're using the tango to explore, to organize, to make that explicit, and then to elicit the help that they need from their partner.
That's right. And the process, through repeating it week to week, session to session, the process goes deeper. People
Yes.
are able to expand these narratives. They're able to tolerate more and more raw emotion that is from these narratives. And then they're also able to turn to their partner and lean in and unisolate the pain of that by sharing it with their partner and inviting the partner to be in it with them and
Yes.
co-regulate, co-burden that moment, right? So in stage one, that's the moment that would be a new step in the dance. I'm sharing vulnerably all this pain that I carry that usually I lash out at you, but here I'm sharing directly with you. And lo and behold, look at that. It pulls you closer to me. And that's what I've been wanting the whole time.
Yes.
And process that with both people. What was that like to have your partner lean in this new way? You know, the lashing out, but you're really receiving this very, very kind of vulnerable, meaningful place that don't show very many people.
Mhm.
What you all did. This moment would usually create a disconnection. So what I've just kind of done is talked about the 5 kind of moves. Where are they? They're kind of caught in this thing. Put a stake in the ground to explore one person's inner world in stage 1 as it pertains to the reactivity that happens in couple conflict.
Mhm.
Then in move 3, once we've helped people kind of organize, meaning they really connect the dots about what the narrative really is and the story's getting clearer and clearer. And now we're also helping them not just organize, but engage, that's a word we toss around, meaning feeling the feelings of that awful narrative.
That's right.
And being vulnerable. And then we can move, once it's organized and engaged, to move 3. Now we can have people have an interactive moment. The enactment happens.
That's right.
And then we process this newly emerging step with both partners and the meaning of it. And then in move 5, we'll zoom out and say, wow, that was incredible. Usually those feelings create, massive, massive conflict here. But here you felt the same feelings, and look what you did. You did this thing differently. It pulled your partner to you. And there's a thing that is possible here, right? So that's the way we would talk about it in stage 1. In stage 2, we would help set the stage for bringing people's attachment fears alive. And so in move 1, we know we are going to move toward, let's say we're starting with our withdrawers first, and want to find a really relevant emotional experience that we can help heighten people. And the ironic hope is, as we heighten people and heighten people and heighten people, that somehow they're not going to be able to reach. And that sounds so bizarre, and it sounds so antithetical to the entire model and attachment process. But what we know is when people have their attachment fears, which by design are when people cannot reach when they're really heightened and clear. And the thing I would say as an aside here is, once we're in stage 2, we will have already completed 70% of the therapy, and people have done dozens of enactments, but here they can't reach.
Right.
So that tells us they're bumping into their own working models, these
That's
places where they doubt their own sense of value, of worth, or they cannot trust that a person could conceivably be there when they really need them. That would be working model of other. And we help people engage with these horrifically painful parts of self, knowing that these are the things that have been limiting factors in people's lives. So many other therapies, we're doing this through the attachment process, that people long to be seen and loved and held and safe with a loving other.
That's right.
And we make that possible because we know their partner's engaged. So here we're helping people distill what those reasons are for not being able to reach. This is still move 2. And we're heightening those because that is a way of describing and distilling their working models. If you saw this part of me, you wouldn't want this part of me. No one's ever wanted this part of me, or no one's ever been there for me. Why would I possibly share this, right? And so we heighten that, and brings up people's life stories, brings up some of the more painful parts of the relationship that never gotten addressed directly in that way. And then we have people ultimately take leaps of faith. So we engage that. It is really emotionally risky. It feels like a leap of faith. And in move 3, we will have people lean in, and an enactment in leaning in that's unique to stage 2 would be asking for their attachment needs to be met when they are feeling, again, the agony of their working models. Because people have no belief whatsoever that anybody would want to be there with them and for them when this stuff comes up. And lo and behold, the partner is, and they process this moment in it's actually new neural networks are getting laid down. Catherine Ream, woman who I've logged some miles with, was a trainer in DC, would call limbic revisioning, which I love. So we've accessed now the neural networks that hold traumatic distress through the attachment channel, through the limbic process of being so emotional. And then we'll zoom out and have people begin to talk about, my life story is changing.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a new step in the dance, it's a new step in my life.
That's right.
So the moves of the tango guide the therapist about what to do and how to bring forward the checkpoints and what's described in each one of them in each of the steps. It's what this does.
I really appreciate, one, you just taking some time here. Let me just cut this section out and listen to this, because you just took us through a pretty broad stroke of each move of the tango that we're doing session to session through stage 1 and then stage 2, which is really delightful to kind of have a picture of that. And then, but I think it would be worth noting as we talk about this, this is where I think people get confused. It's like, okay, so when do I do that? And when do I do the steps? Right. And this has been said so many times, but I want to be really clear. What we're saying is the tango, as we do what you just described over and over and over, as a result, we will begin to see the steps being fulfilled, right? We stay doing the tango. And that's why the tango has become so important. And it's such an incredible tool in the EFT world, because it gives us a thing to say, right, we're doing this over and over and over. And we're going to watch those big overarching goals be met, the big ones from the stage that stage ones are defining. And we'll see all the little processes happening along the way start to get checked as well, as we stay in and around the tango, going around and around and around, session to session, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah. And within the tango, we'll get into this at another time, but there are all sorts of kind of learning curves and therapeutic skills that
Yes.
get built over time. But what I hope people can begin to at least get a rough sketch of here is the general map, right?
Yes.
We have stages, and the goal of each stage is enormously different. What we're doing with emotion to bring about that goal is a bit different, right? We're trying to get underneath an action tendency and show that there's a
Right.
narrative and there's all sorts of emotional distress that is leading to that. It's not just this awful human being doing this awful thing.
Yep.
We're bringing forward what lives on the inside. In stage 2, we're helping people really start to understand and get in touch with things that oftentimes people disown. This stuff can be so painful that people just block it out of consciousness altogether. And yet we do what I consider one of the most significant therapeutic processes in all of psychotherapy, not just with EFT, but
Right.
how do you access that stuff?
Yep.
Because if it's out of consciousness, it's out of consciousness, right? You can't just talk therapy your way into that. We have to find a way to enter the neural networks, the limbic system that hold that distress. And therapists have to have the stomach for that.
Yes.
There are all sorts of therapeutic skills, whether it's heightening, whether it's tolerating emotion,
Right.
whether it's simply integrating the steps and where we're going and what that means, right?
Right.
Use attachment language that happens to bring a more effective way of doing the tango. But the tango is
Yeah.
our guide of what to do.
Yeah, that's a large conversation, right? Because I don't know. Again, thinking about your nestling dolls, it's like we've got this big tango, and it's really helpful. And in that, there's 5 moves, right? And in those moves, there's interventions that we're doing along the way to
Yes.
do those particular things within the moves within the tango. So it really does become, a bit of a Russian doll situation of just
Yeah.
going, oh man, each piece has these elements to it that are so important. But I'm hoping that what our listeners are gathering today is just a sense of a little bit more clarity around these big pieces that they've come to EFT to learn, around the stages, what these steps are, and what the tango is, as far as it informs the process of what we do. And of course, we're going to get into more of the how we then begin to do this. But I hope this is a way for people to see this is how this all kind of fits together. I really appreciate that.
Me too. That's what I hope people get from this, because I know on my own journey, it was very confusing for a long time. And this is one of the light bulb moments about the way all of this kind of links together in a really, again, user-friendly way. There are skills to hone and to use and ways of integrating this to take a little bit of time, or a lot of time. But understanding the place of each one of these and how it can be helpful to the EFT therapist, right? From the most broad stroke, these are the stages, and this is what I'm trying to accomplish, to using steps as a way of understanding the client process and progress, and have they integrated those aspects of each step, and then how to bring those about. How do we help people then fulfill what's supposed to be integrated in each step? And that becomes a tango. That's what this is doing consistently. It's a very
Awesome.
experiential process. Yeah.
Our hope is to continue to make a clearer and clearer picture of what EFT is and how we can do this therapy really well. I really appreciate today's conversation, and thank you for all the wisdom that you offer our podcast. Yeah, I feel grateful to keep learning from and with you.
Oh, well, thank you for the dialogue. It brings it alive for me in ways that help me continue to integrate further. So I'm loving being in a genuine dialogue with you about all of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Same. Well, I think we'll leave this one here. I think that's a lot of meat for people to chew on, and we'll pick us up in the next episode.
Perfect.
All right, we'll see you then.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Emotionally Focused Therapy Podcast. We hope this podcast is an encouragement for your EFT journey, bringing clarity and understanding of EFT to your work. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcast. To learn more about training with Michael Barnett, go to www.michaelbarnettlpc.com. To connect with Michael Preston as a supervisor, go to www.michaelprestonlpc.com. Tune in again next time to hear more of this great conversation.